What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and I am so excited to be sharing with you my favorite illustration rares from Scarlet and Violet so far. And I thought this would be a really cool time to do this exercise because we're on the other side of halfway for the entire Scarlet and Violet block, which is incredibly, I don't know, it's just crazy to say that. It seems like Scarlet and Violet just kicked off yesterday, but here we are. Scarlet and Violet 7 is out. We are all highly anticipating Scarlet and Violet 8, which is going to be Surging Sparks. We all know there's going to be some sort of Team Rocket set on the future, so I think we have a lot of really cool sets that are coming up ahead of us, but that's not to say we haven't had some awesome sets and some amazing cards that have already come out, so I thought now would be a really good time to do a deep dive into them. Now, if you think about it, in Sword and Shield, things started to get really interesting around Sword and Shield 5, which was Battle Styles. Battle Styles was when we saw the introduction of alt arts, and then not long after that, we saw trainer galleries, and I mean, everything after Battle Styles, the sets performed really well. And again, just because a set launches at the same time as a previously successful set, it means absolutely nothing. There is no correlation. But there is a trend where we see some of the stronger sets of the eras come out towards the very end of that era. And I'm going to tell you right now, I am highly anticipating Surging Sparks, and I'm very much looking forward to what's coming down the road because I think we still have yet to see some of the best artworks from some of the biggest name Pokemon around. So I think we're going to end with a bang in Scarlet and Violet. But before we get to that big bang, I thought it would be awesome to talk about, some of the exciting cards that have been out so far. And these are 9 cards. And what I did was I took all of the illustration rares and I ranked them from top to bottom in terms of value. And I really focused on the top 75 most expensive illustration rares. And then from that list of top 75, I came up with these 9. And these are my favorite. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that now is the time to pull the trigger on them. It doesn't mean that these are going to give the biggest returns further down the road, although I do think most of these have a big upside when you're thinking of long term, like in the next 3-5 years or something like that. But I do think there's a very compelling and interesting story between each one of these, and that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to go and double click into each one individually and kind of tell you what I think is special about it. Obviously, they all have amazing art, but there are some intangibles too that I think will help them grow and at least support a lot of collector demand further into the future. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, I pulled these cards first before I actually did this exercise, but once I pulled them, I went back and I noticed that, all of these are really original Pokemon, right? I mean, Gen 1s all across the board. You got one Gen 2 in there. You got a Gen 3 in there. So, I mean, when you look at this, these are the OGs of OGs in the Pokemon space. And we all know that the OGs tend to have a little bit more demand to them. More people just know the Pokemon. There's a lot of love for those earlier sets, and these Pokemon are in there. So, I mean, I think that is something that will help give these cards a lot of opportunity for future growth and future demand farther down the line. So I just thought that was a really cool call out before we started to get into the individual cards. Now, as always, before I get into the individual cards, I gotta give my selfless plug because guess what? We're a small channel, and doing any of these 3 small things go a really long way in helping me out. So if you can find it in the kindness of your heart to do them, 2 thumbs up to you. I really appreciate it. One of them is hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. We do fun stuff like this all the time. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. And if you have questions or comments, drop them down below. I appreciate you more than I can say. Let's get into the video right now. So the first one that we're going to start off with is the Eevee from Twilight Masquerade. And so far, Twilight Masquerade is the set, but as I said, we have a lot of awesomeness ahead of us in the rest of Scarlet and Violet, and Twilight Masquerade, at least in my humble opinion, will be topped. I don't think Twilight Masquerade is the pinnacle of Scarlet and Violet awesomeness, but that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a big subset of awesome sets in Scarlet and Violet, and Twilight Masquerade certainly could be one of them. I mean, when you think about it, you got Lost Origin, you got Chilling Reign, right? You got Brilliant Stars. I mean, you could make an argument for Silver Tempest. I mean, there's just a lot of awesome sets in Sword and Shield, and I think we're gonna have a lot of awesome sets in Scarlet and Violet as well, and it certainly looks like Twilight Masquerade could be one of them. And then obviously we all know that Eevee and Eeveelutions are crazy popular. It's always been the case. That's not going anywhere anytime soon. So I think the longevity of this card is certainly going to hold on well. And then, Twilight Masquerade does have some pretty low pull rates, but the thing I will talk about first on this slide is the gem rate of Twilight Masquerade. So it's basically a ratio, the number of cards that are sent to PSA versus the number ones that are come back in a PSA 10 gem mint holder. That gives you the overall gem rate, right? The gem rate on this Eevee card is higher than all of the other cards we're going to see throughout the rest of this video. It has a 60% gem rate. And, what we we've seen in the past is when you have really popular Pokemon and really awesome artwork and relatively low gem rates, that can help spur a whole bunch of demand for those raw cards further down the road, because if there's a low PSA 10 gem mint population for a really popular Pokemon card that has some awesome art, the PSA 10s are usually super expensive, so that also drives up the price of the raw card. Now, I don't mean that that's going to keep this price low. Again, we're just going to have to see what the market demands, but I do think that that's something to call out, that this does have a relatively high PSA 10 gem rate compared to a lot of its peers, which we're going to talk about throughout the course of this video. Now, I will call out, hey, this card has had a very strong launch period, right? This card is actually way up versus when it came out. It came out right around $25. It's still up at $43, although it is down about 18% over the last month. I love this card. I will own this card. I will own multiple copies of this card. I do not love it at $44. So this is just my personal, collecting thing right here. I'm telling you, I'm not buying it at $44. I'm going to wait a while and see if it drops back down. I think there's a lot of Twilight Masquerade left to be open. So I think that there will be more of these hitting the market, which hopefully will drive the price down a little bit. But again, long term, think this card is a stud. Think this card will do really, really well. The next one we're looking at right here is a card that has already done really, really well. But despite that, I still think it has an incredibly high ceiling compared to what we've already seen. And I talked about the gem rate on that Eevee card being at 60%. Well, the Magikarp here, there is only 1,227 of these in PSA 10 holders in the world, period, hard stop. That is it. This set is coming up on 16 months old, right? This card has a gem rate of 23.2%, which is as low as you're going to find. There's actually one card on here which has a lower gem rate, but it doesn't matter. When you're in the low 20s, when you're in the high teens, it is a very, very difficult card to get in that PSA 10 holder, and that's going to drive value. And we've seen that with this Magikarp card. Obviously, it has stunning artwork. I mean, I love the fact that you got the Gyarados, which is hiding in the background. I love the way the red and the blue and the yellow kind of pops off the black. I have this card. I have it on PSA 9. I sent it to PSA thinking I could get a 10, and of course it came back a 9, just like the other, I don't know, 76% of the people who sent their cards out there. But one of the things that gives me a lot of, optimism about the long-term prosperity of this card is when you look at the growth chart, you don't see those crazy ups and downs. You see them a little bit, but it has grown very organically. It looks like very natural growth, very strong growth. And it has had this prolonged strength and support up over the $100 mark. Ever since March of 2024, this card has been north of $100, and the market has continually supported it. It's had time where it's tried to break down, but it has never broke below that. So for now, considering that this card, is still very new, right? And we could even see restocks and reprints of Paldea Evolved. Who knows what is going to happen, but as long as the gem rate stays low, I promise you, I think this card is going to have a very bright future no matter what happens. And again, think about it. We're in month number 16. Like, it's incredible how old this card is in compared to some of the peers. And certainly, I just don't think of it being that old, but it is. The card is awesome. The artwork is awesome. The gem rate is terrible. So I think this card has a lot of upside long into the future. The next card right here from the same set is the Tyranitar, and I was really debating, do I want to put the Tyranitar here? Do I want to put the Raichu card here? And the Tyranitar card kind of won for a couple reasons. First off, it has a much lower entry point right now. So again, when I'm comparing two things that are very similar, if I have a lower entry point, I'm going to prioritize that one. And the other thing, I do like the fact that there was a Sleepy T-Tar out of Battle Styles that we talked about, and I know it's an alt art, and I know Sword and Shield is a totally different era with a totally different collector base, but I do like the fact that that's a $100 plus card from a set that's not super exciting. I guess overall, Battle Styles is still available on the Pokemon Center here in the US from a booster box perspective. So the fact that the Sleepy T-Tar can hold that price point gives me a lot of faith in Tyranitar overall as a whole. And this was the card that I was talking about. There's only 334 of these in PSA 10 holders in the world. Only 334. That is it. Again, the set is 16 months old. This has a 19.3% gem rate. That is absolutely abysmal. There are not going to be many of these in PSA 10 holders ever. It's just not going to happen, right? So it's going to drive demand for this singles card price. It's going to drive the PSA 10 price. All of that is a recipe for success in my book. Now, this card is starting to come down a little bit. You saw it had a spike, and it's been slowly working its way down. It does look like it's starting to level itself off a little bit right around the $25 mark, which is I think is really exciting. And the other thing that I want to call out too is don't sleep on Paldea Evolved, okay? We're going to have some great sets that are going to be coming out here in the near future, and it's going to drive a lot of market attention, and everybody's going to be spending their Poké dollars on that. And I think that is a very good investment. I think that's a good thing. But sometimes when that's happening, other really awesome sets like Paldea Evolved and singles cards like this can kind of get overlooked, which might present a buying opportunity for savvy collectors and investors out there. So don't sleep on Paldea Evolved while all the other excitement is happening out there. Next card is this Chansey. So I already talked about Twilight Masquerade quite a bit, and Twilight Masquerade's overall gem rate is 62.3% if you take all of the cards from Twilight Masquerade that have been submitted, and the total number that have been graded in PSA 10 is 62.3%. So a card like this will end up right there. I love that this is a sub $10 Gen 1 Pokemon card from a great set like Twilight Masquerade. I think the artwork on here is awesome. You'll hear me talk about this a couple other times throughout the video. I love mashups where you have multiple Pokemon that are on a card together, especially when they're all as well represented as they are in this one. I think this is really cool. When you think about some of the alt arts, I was like, hey, this kind of reminds me of the Celebi card from Fusion Strike, and I don't know, I just got a lot of warm and fuzzy feelings about this. And again, while everybody's out there chasing the Eevee, while everybody's chasing the Greninja from Twilight Masquerade, you've got this Chansey card, which is a stunner of a card, just kind of chilling here, continually dropping, starting to find some support in the $8.50 range. When I think about the risk to reward ratio, like really low risk, you're spending sub $10 on this card. The upside, I think, is there. Is it ever going to be a $100 card? Absolutely not. I don't think this has a $100 card in the future. I don't think the market's suddenly going to wake up one day and be like, oh, this isn't an $8.50 card. Let's everybody buy it and drive it up to $50, $60, $70. But when I'm thinking the long run from a percentage standpoint, I think you'd have some solid gains here, and I just think it's an awesome card. So really excited to have this one on the list. The next one right here, I talk about this card a lot. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I talk about a single card more often than I should, but there's everything to love about this as far as I'm concerned. So it's from 151. What can I say about 151 that I haven't already said? It's a set for the ages, extremely popular, really low gem rate overall for all the cards in the set. It's just amazing. What else can nothing's going to derail that. We can print it to demand, we can print it into the ground, we can do all kinds of things, but guess what? 151 is going to be absorbed by the hobby because the demand is so high. Now, obviously, if they print it into the ground, it could absolutely mute some growth in the short run, but I think in the long run, all of these cards are going to be just fine. Now, this Pikachu right here has a 41% gem rate. There are 2,000 of these in PSA 10 holders right now, which when you think about the popularity of 151 and you think about all of the hype around it, I was actually surprised. To me, that number is relatively low. 151, again, it's a year old, and a year into this, there's only 2,000 of these in PSA 10 holders. Another card that I think this isn't going to end up in the $10,000 range, like we see with, or excuse me, 10,000 card range, 10,000 pop range, like we see with a lot of these ultra modern chase cards. So I love that about this. And again, Pikachu mashup cards, where you have all kinds of other Pokemon on it, tend to do really well. We have seen it time and time again throughout the ages. So you've got Pikachu, which is one of the most, if not the most popular Pokemon out there. You got it from 151, which is one of the most, if not the most popular set from Scarlet and Violet. You've got a mashup, which has a strong history of growth, right? You've got Gengar there on the front, and Gengar is one of the most popular Pokemon with strong history of growth. Just every single thing about that checks the box for me. And then when I think about this card coming in right at $20, again, risk versus reward. I'm telling you, this is not a $20 card 3 years from now. I just think this card has a lot of upside. I'm not saying it's going to be a $200 card, but I do think this card has some strong room for growth, and I certainly don't ever see it dropping below the $20 mark for long periods of time, right? I could see it drop below depending on what the market does, but again, I just feel really safe at the $20 price point here. You're buying a great card at a very fair price. So really excited about this Pikachu. Next card right here, the Gastly, another one that I really love because it has the whole evolution line on there, right? You got Gastly, you got Haunter, you got Gengar. I love everything about that. Not a super high gem rate, but a little bit higher than we saw on the Pikachu, and certainly higher than the cards from Paldea Evolved, coming in at 44%. Now, Temporal Forces is relatively new in the grand scheme of things. There's only been 2,500 submitted, but guess what? Out of 2,500, that's a big enough sample size for us to say, okay, you know, about a 40-45% gem rate for this card is going to hold up. Now, the interesting thing to me is I know Morty's Conviction got a lot of love early on. Remember, that card spiked all the way up to $100 for a brief moment. Now it's down to the $30 range. And people got excited about it because it had Gengar on it. I think this card is actually, in the long run, going to overtake Morty's Conviction. I'm not saying that this card is going to be a $100 card like Morty's was at some point, but I do, believe it or not, call me crazy, I do think that this card in the long run might be more valuable than the Morty's Conviction. So we should see. Now, the other thing that's interesting to me about Temporal Forces is when you look at the top chase cards in that set, they're really being driven by playability. You know, those cards have, they have some awesome decks that are built around them. They're big players in the game. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, again, 3 years from now when everything's rotated out, like what cards are going to be at the very top of Temporal Forces. So I thought that was an interesting call out, and I just love the artwork on this card. I have 2 of them. I think they're stunning. Not good enough to send to PSA, but I absolutely love having them in the binder collection because I love Gengar. You guys know that, and I love this card. So the next card card we're looking at right here, ooh, this Groudon right here. Okay, so I have a lot to say about this card. I think it is relatively high from a price point right now. It's at $48, but it doesn't matter what I think, because if you look at it, it has been very, very strongly supported north of $45 for quite a while. Now, this card does have a higher gem rate than some of the other cards that we've looked at. This gem rate is actually coming in right at 50%. But guess what? As I said throughout the course of this video, the gem rate isn't the end-all be-all, right? Demand is the most important thing. Supply and demand has to be out of balance in order for something to happen, right? If demand is too high and supply is low, then guess what? The price goes up. But if supply is high and price is low, then guess what? The price goes down. That's how this all works. But what's going to matter is, where is this card going to end up in the long term? I know we have Roaring Moon sitting at number 1 just by a couple dollars. This could be, I'm not saying it will be, but this very much could be the long-term chase card in Paradox Rift, and I think that would be really, really exciting right there. The other thing is, I called this out at a 50% gem rate, but if you go back and you look at Sword and Shield chase cards, like if you look at all of the alt arts, almost all of them are in the 65 to 75% gem rate range, and that certainly has not stopped any of them from growing like crazy. So a 50% gem rate is certainly not high, especially if you compare it to those other cards from the Sword and Shield era. Again, different era, different time, different collecting base, I get all of that, but it is a good barometer to kind of compare the two gem rates to. And the other thing that I will say is just the card's stunning. The artwork is awesome. I love the volcanoes going off in the background. I love that it's chilling there on an island. Like, it's going to be interesting to see how this card ages and what happens at the very top of Paradox Rift. Now, the next one right here is the Warttal card from 151, and again, not going to beat the dead horse that I did earlier, just talking about 151 in general, but lower gem rate than the Pikachu, coming in at 38%. There's only 1.5 thousand K, so 1,500 of these exist in PSA 10s. And when I think about this is one of the best artwork-wise evolution lines that I think I've seen. The Squirtle, the Warttal, the Blastoise. Like, when you put all three of those together, I know that you got the Charizard, the Charmeleon, and the Charmander, which has the higher price points. But when I just step back and look at them and disengage from an artwork perspective, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm taking the Squirtle, the Warttal, and the Blastoise all day long. The other thing that I really like about this card, which I think is going to help it grow in the long run, is the fact that the evolution line is so awesome from an artwork perspective, and the Blastoise is the number 2 card in the whole set. The second most valuable card is that Blastoise. So long into the future, when people want to pull together that amazing evolution line, they're going to have the Squirtle, they're going to have the Warttal, they're going to have the Blastoise. A lot of people are going to want all of those in PSA 10 holders. PSA 10s are going to be very, very hard to come by. I guarantee it. That's going to drive those 10 holders up. It's going to drive the raw card prices up. Like, I think there's just going to be this organic growth among all three of those cards, and I think that the Blastoise sitting at number 2, is a big catalyst for that. So really excited. And again, let me say it, just another card from 151 coming in at the $20 mark. When you think about risk and reward, you can't go wrong with this card at $20. Just an absolute steal. Even though over the last year it has had its ups and had its downs, my gosh, $20 for an amazing piece of art like this, whether you're a collector, whether you're an investor, it's really hard to go wrong with that. So the last card on the list, and I just threw this in here. So we don't know much about Stellar Crown right now. Obviously, it has just dropped. And one of the things that I was thinking about is you don't normally see print quality go down throughout the ages, right? As an era starts getting older and older, you typically don't see print quality decline. Now, you might see print quality get worse at the beginning of an era, right? Like we saw the beginning of Scarlet and Violet when we switched to the silver borders, right? Print quality was horrible all the way through to 151 before they finally started to get the print quality up a little bit. But I don't think we're going to see the print quality decline. So this card will probably end up, I don't know, at the gem rate, again, in the mid 60s, maybe even higher. We'll just have to wait and see. And one of the things about Stellar Crown is, I know you got the Terrapagos there at number 1. I know everybody loves that card, but for me, that's kind of like, we're lacking a big number 1 at the top of that set. And this Squirtle could find a way. I don't think it's going to be the number 1 card, but I think it could find some traction. And one of the things that concerns me a bit is it is from a smaller set, right? And typically smaller sets have better pull rates, right? Because you don't have as many illustration rares or special illustration rares that are fighting for that slot in the pack. So you can pull these more frequently. And then can an entire era support 2 awesome Squirtle cards? I just talked about the awesome one from 151, and obviously I'm highlighting another one right here. So I don't know. Maybe this is the era of Squirtle. We shall just have to wait and see. But no matter what, I think this artwork is really, really cool. It might be a little bit childish. You know, we've seen some cards like Lana's Aid, which hasn't quite gotten all the steam that it should have from Twilight Masquerade, probably because the artwork is a little cartoony, which this kind of is as well. So I don't know. Maybe the market will love this art. Maybe the market will hate it. But no matter what, I think it's a really cool card. And it's doing what you would expect, okay? It's came out and it's absolutely dropping, you know, as more Stellar Crown gets cracked. Hopefully this card will continue to come down in price and we'll just have to keep an eye on it. But that's it. Those are my favorite illustration rares from Scarlet and Violet so far. I am sure that I missed one or two of your favorites and you were thinking, what are you thinking for not having XYZ on this list? And if that is the case, let me know in the comments down below what your favorite is and which one I missed. And if you enjoyed the content, if you thought this was fun and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you doing? We do fun stuff like this all the time. And again, I'd appreciate it if while you're at it, you hit that thumbs up. Those 3 small things go a long way in helping the channel out. I really appreciate you, and you all have an epic one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.